Welcome to Running Hot, Action Network's motorsports betting podcast. I'm your host, Nick Giffen, predictive analyst here at Action Network. And joining me, as usual, my co-host, Stephen Young of Roto Grinders, better known as Stevie TPFL. And this week, we're talking bets for the Hollywood Casino 400 at Kansas Speedway here on Running Hot. Last weekend at Bristol, Kyle Larson, he stunk up the show, really. He just stunk up the joint, leading well over 400 of the 500 laps on the way to the win, lapping, 75% of the field. Just absolute dominant performance by Kyle Larson. Chase Elliott ended up finishing second. Bubba Wallace ends up finishing third. And as far as the playoff picture goes, the drivers that got eliminated in round one were Ty Gibbs, Brad Keselowski, Martin Truex Jr., and Harrison Burton, leaving 12 drivers left to battle it out. We will be talking about that in our Kansas preview. But Stevie, thoughts on Bristol?
Larson could just run the top better than everybody else. I mean, the cars are so close together with this current car and setup and stuff that Larson being able to run the top better than anybody else, they were all very similar in speed outside of the fact that he just had so much more corner speed than everybody else. I mean, he had a dominant race car, and the skill of Bristol of being able to run the top, hats off to him, right? What he did wasn't easy, and I don't like people complaining about it. I've taken a lap around Bristol before with Darrell Waltrip a long time ago, and the G's just incredible, and we were doing 110, and these guys are doing way faster than that. So I mean, just what Larson did was so incredibly impressive that I think we just tip our cap to him. The tire wore. It didn't wear as much as the spring, but it had tire wear. It laid down rubber. They tried the PJ1 on the bottom to try to make the bottom better, and it made the bottom better because the Xfinity race, the bottom was terrible. So it's Bristol. I mean, unfortunately, with this car and not having more horsepower and making drivers drive through the corner differently, it's what we have right now. I don't know what fixes it. I don't know if it's horsepower. It's not the tire because all the tires are wearing the same. They're all going to pit when they need to pit. Tyler Reddick stayed out to try to win a stage, and he got passed by 4 cars right off the bat in 2 laps. So the tires mattered. It just didn't matter because they all pitted at the same time. So I think it would have been interesting with 20 laps to go had there been a caution and who would have stayed out to try to win and who would have come down to get tires. I think that's where we could have maybe seen a difference. But Truex shot himself in the foot. Kyle Larson did what he needed to do, and Denny Hamlin did what he needed to do. I'm happy Denny got it through because I think he's going to be a huge contender down the stretch here.
Yeah, a lot of things to touch on here, and probably don't have time for all of it. But, you're right about the tires. They did fall off around 0.7 seconds from the start to the end of the run, which at a half-mile track is almost 2 seconds at a mile-and-a-half track, right? So they definitely fell off. And I think to your point, everybody's on the same tires, right? And so everybody, aside from Larson, was so close together. There was a advanced analytics post, I think, that showed if everybody used their median fourth quarter lap or whatever, the Larson would have been ahead of the field, and then the next 11 drivers were all under a blanket. So when everybody's going the same speed, it's so hard to pass. We want passing. It sucks when Martin Truex Jr. can run second or third or fourth all day, go to the back of the field and be unable to pass because he's back in traffic. I don't like seeing that. That's what I complain about. I don't care that Larson led 400 whatever laps. That doesn't bother me. That's not why I thought it was a frustrating race. I thought it was a frustrating race because once you went to the back, it took nearly a whole race to get back to the front, as we saw with Ty Gibbs. And then he finally worked so hard to get back to 7th. He burnt off his tires and fell back at the end of the race there. Maybe we need to do away with stages at Bristol or something because we didn't have green flag pit stops. We pitted at the end of stage 1. We pitted at the end of stage 2. There was a caution relatively early in stage 3, which allowed us to get to the end of the race. So there was no green flag pitting. There's no strategy. There's no way to differentiate yourselves. And that's the issue here is these cars are all the same. We're basically in spec cars. 3 different spec cars with 3 different manufacturers, but there's no way to differentiate yourself right now at Bristol, aside from Kyle Larson, and it makes it really hard to pass. And I think that was my big problem. We didn't used to see this much difficulty passing at Bristol as we have in the past. So something to think about as we head into Kansas, but we are going to Kansas for the Hollywood Casino 400. Kansas, a 1.5 mile track, our classic intermediate track. Racing at Kansas, some of the best of the year. We saw a 5 wide pass for second place earlier this year. And of course, we saw a potentially 4 wide, definitely 2 wide, but it kind of was 4 wide battle for the win earlier this year in a photo finish with Kyle Larson just barely beating Chris Buescher to the finish. So, Stevie, I know we're excited for this one. Let's talk about Kansas.
Yeah, Kansas is great, right? Like I feel like it's been the best racetrack for this next gen era. All 5 races here have been fantastic. It's produced fantastic racing. Like, if you're a race car fan and you're within like 8 hours of Kansas, you should go, because I mean, the racing has just been incredible. So, and I don't think it's going to be any different this weekend. I think it's going to be a great race.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be a great race. Historically, Kansas has been, dominated by Toyota as well as Hendrick Motorsports, but we've seen some other guys pop up in there. Certainly Kyle Busch with Richard Childress Racing can look strong there. Ross Chastain, Daniel Suarez has looked strong in the past, although I don't think this is necessarily the year for Daniel Suarez to continue to look strong at Kansas. So, those Trackhouse guys have looked strong here. So there've been some others that have kind of gotten in the mix. And then, of course, the RFK Racing guys, especially over the past year, 2 or 3 Kansas races, have really gotten into the mix there as well, with Chris Buescher almost taking the win earlier this year at Kansas. So we kind of know who's going to be good. How else are we handicapping this one? I mean, we're pulling in other tracks. Are we just relying on Kansas? Are we using current form? What are we doing for Kansas?
I mean, yes, everything you said, right? We're going to use current form. We're going to look at recent speed. Kansas is a speed racetrack, so obviously recent speed matters a lot here. We're going to look at high speed intermediates. We're going to look at Kansas. We're going to look at Texas. We're going to look at Charlotte. We're going to look at Vegas. I think I'll throw in a little bit of Michigan data as well, because that's our last real high speed test. And really, I'll be honest, all 5 of those tracks, you kind of get the same 15 drivers with the next gen car. So I think I'm just going to kind of base around those guys and build from there. And I mean, overall, I think it's going to be Hendrick and JGR. I think those are the 2, or Toyota. I say JGR, but I mean, I definitely include Reddick and Bubba Wallace in there as well. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, Toyota versus Hendrick this weekend, I think, is what we're looking at.
Yeah, I agree with you there. And certainly don't want to forget to mention, the Stewart-Haas guys have sometimes shown some speed at Kansas as well. Harvick certainly in the past, but Noah Gragson has, at least at Vegas, had a really good race. So Josh Berry, and then, of course, Chase Briscoe in the playoffs. There's going to be a lot of focus on him. So definitely some of these Stewart-Haas guys racing can pop here and there at Kansas as well. Let's talk about that playoff picture, Stevie. We reset 12 drivers. Kyle Larson leads with 3,047 points. But the cut line is down at Joey Logano in 8th, Austin Cindric in 9th. Joey Logano with 3,012 points. So he's 4 points ahead of the cut line, where Austin Cindric is at 3,008 points, which puts Kyle Larson, the points leader, 39 points to the good. So Austin Cindric, Daniel Suarez, Alex Bowman, and Chase Briscoe currently the 4 on the outside looking in. What do you make of this second round of the playoffs?
You can't make any mistakes. You kind of got away with making a mistake or even 2 in Denny Hamlin's way of looking at it. You can't make mistakes in this round. This round is very tight. All 12 drivers, I think, deserve to be there. Ty Gibbs probably more than Daniel Suarez or Austin Cindric, in my opinion, but Austin Cindric just put together a phenomenal first round. I mean, hats off to him. But, I mean, look at it. It's Larson, it's Bell, it's Reddick, Byron, Blaney, Hamlin, Elliott, Logano. Where's the weak point? There is no weak point anymore. Alex Bowman's been running great. He's in the bottom half. He's going to continue to run good. He starts off with a good track here at Kansas for Hendrick and him. So, I mean, my biggest thing is you just can't make a mistake. There's just no mistakes to be had. You have to take stage points when you can. And it's a big week. I mean, our big month. And you get Talladega and you get the Roval. So if you can just have 3 consistent races, you should advance, because some people are going to have some issues at Talladega. Some people are going to have some issues at the Roval. You got to put together 3 good races here.
Absolutely. And I think this will be an interesting spot. Talladega will be an interesting spot to maybe fade some of these drivers that are really comfortable on points. We've seen it in the past where, if you get a 60, 70 point gap going into the second race of a 3-race stint, and that one is a super speedway type race. We've seen guys take it easy. Joey Logano last year. We've seen it at Daytona earlier this year with some guys taking it easy because they were good on points. Martin Truex Jr., for example. So I think that's another spot where we can attack on betting, maybe some head-to-head props or group props that might involve some of these drivers. But let's talk bets for Kansas. As always, we're going to take you for a lap around Kansas Speedway. That's 4 turns, 1 pick from Stevie, 1 pick from me for each turn before we drive into victory lane. So we're going to throw the green flag on the Hollywood Casino 400 and dive into turn 1. All right, turn 1, Stevie, right off the bat, we're going to some winner picks, both me and you. Who you got?
I'm going to go to Christopher Bell here, 13-1. I'm just on Christopher Bell to win the championship. So they've been running fantastic. His pit crew has been awesome. He has not been awesome on pit road. He needs to clean up some stuff. He's been losing positions, but his pit crew has been absolutely outstanding. We've talked about it a lot. This is Ty Gibbs' pit crew from last year. They won both of the pit crew challenges recently, so they've just been awesome. 13-1, I think, is a really good number here on Bell. He was extremely fast at the beginning of the race earlier this year. The first two parts of the race, he was probably the fastest car. Had some issues after that, but if we just look at raw speed, he had plenty of it. And if we look at Kansas, he ranks second in speed behind Denny Hamlin in the next-gen era. Top 5 in speed in every race here with the next-gen car. So absolutely love Bell. I think that we're not going to get a car that is projected to be like a top 3 car at this number this week. I mean, we're going to talk about it with a couple other outrights that we have. But, yeah, I mean, I absolutely love Bell at 13-1.
Yeah, me too. I definitely like Christopher Bell at 13-1. Haven't added him to my card yet. We'll probably end up getting there, though, especially after what you just said here. But you're right. I mean, Christopher Bell has been strong pretty much everywhere. It doesn't matter what kind of track, and definitely at these higher speed intermediates. Ran well at Kansas earlier this year. Took the pole, led some laps, finished 6th. Obviously, he won at Charlotte, winning stage 2, winning stage 3, leading the most laps. So definitely a good track type here for Christopher Bell. For my turn 1 pick, I'm going to go to his Toyota teammate, Tyler Reddick, at 8.5-1. Tracked at 8.5-1 earlier this week in the Action Network app, and still have an 8.5-1 out there. Look, this is a 2311 track, right? I mean, Kurt Busch won here in a 2311 car. Bubba Wallace won here in a 2311 car. Tyler Reddick won here in a 2311 car. So why not Tyler Reddick again? We saw at Kansas's most similar comp, Las Vegas, earlier this year. Tyler Reddick was catching Kyle Larson for the lead. You give another 2-3 laps, he probably passes Larson, maybe even one more lap in that race. He probably passes Larson for the win at Las Vegas. Had some issues at Kansas earlier this year, but remember, that was right after they got the win, so potentially could have been a little experimenting going on there, although Bubba Wallace wasn't as good either. But still could have been some testing, some experimenting going on, and maybe Bubba just had a bad day. And then all of a sudden, Tyler Reddick right back at it in the high-speed intermediates, 4th at Charlotte, 4th at Texas, 1st at Michigan, the 2-mile track, which is, of course, like you said, I'm willing to pull in some Michigan simply because it's the most recent data point we have on this track type. So Tyler Reddick, 8.5-1. He is 3rd in my model, but I have him a little bit higher than 8.5-1. I have him closer to like plus 775, plus 800. So still some value there at plus 850.
You know this because we were talking about it pre-show, but I'm really sad I missed this bet. So I live in Florida. My betting is plus 650, and I just can't do it at plus 650. I like Reddick a lot. I'm with you. I definitely would bet him at this number. I think that him, Bell, Gibbs could be the spoilers as far as like winning this race. I think like Larson and Hamlin are the favorites. Byron's another like spoiler that could win this race. So we can't. I don't think we can fire the numbers at Larson and Hamlin unless like that's going to be your solo bets for the weekend, and you just hope that like one of the favorites win. But yeah, I mean, I like Tyler Reddick. Like you said, this is a good track for 2311. This is a good track for Toyota. And he's coming off of a Michigan race where he had a ton of speed, and he's had a ton of speed at high-speed intermediates all season. I mean, if we look at it, he was fast at Vegas. He was really fast at Texas. Early Kansas race, he had some issues in that race, so I'm not too concerned with that either. And top 10 at Charlotte as far as speed. So, yeah, I mean, I like it.
All righty. Well, turn 1, a pair of Toyota winners. So we'll continue that in turn 2. All right, Stevie, turn to another Toyota winner for you. Who are you going with on this one?
Yeah, I'm going to go to Ty Gibbs 20-1. He had a lot of speed here earlier this year. And I mean, high speed intermediates have been really good for him just as far as speed in general. His Kansas, like raw speed, will not show like how much speed he actually had because of some stuff that happened in that race. But he's really been a top 5 car on high speed intermediates all season. So my model has him in like the 6 to 7 range as far as like win probability, and we're getting him at 20-1, which is showing some value. So anytime my model shows value on Ty Gibbs, I'm a sucker for it. So I bet a half a unit on this one, and I took it at 20-1.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll have some more to say about Ty Gibbs in the future of this episode here, but I definitely like this pick. I'm going a little different route on my Ty Gibbs pick, you'll see, but certainly can't go wrong when we both like a driver in Ty Gibbs. 20-1 to win for Stevie. For my turn to pick, I'm going to take William Byron to win at 13-1. If you saw yesterday, I tracked it in the Action Network app at 16-1. It has since moved to 13-1. Still like it there. Still have value on it. I have this closer to 11.5, 12-1 on Byron. So some value at 13-1. Look, William Byron, if we go back to that first Vegas race, remember, he was running probably third, second all day until he got the world's largest trash bag on his grill and had to go a lap down. And was able to come all the way back and still finish 10th, which was an incredible feat, right? They ended up ingesting a beer can into the radiator from that as well, from the trash bag. So just a weird one there. And then he went through his midseason, air quote, slump that he seems to always do, but it's because he gets those wins early. He had 3 wins in the first 10 races, and they can do things. They can test around, but then he always seems to bounce back in playoff time. And, you know, we're getting a driver who I mentioned was a top 3 car at Las Vegas, finished third at Charlotte, finished third at Texas, 2 or 3 of our main comps. Didn't have a good Kansas race at all. But he has been good at Kansas in the past. So I'm not too worried about that. This is going to be a JGR and Hendrick dominant race. We saw in the first Kansas race last year, he took the pole, led some laps, ran really well. And then the second Kansas race didn't run quite as well, but he does have that ability to run well at Kansas. I would say maybe this is his worst of the intermediates. That said, 13-1, just too long for William Byron here. For me, my model has him 11.5, 12-1.
This is another one I'm sad I missed because now it's 9-1 in Florida. But yeah, I mean, this is a bet. Like, if you jumped on this as soon as like lines open, you were able to get it at 16-1, and that number was just way too good. I still like it at this number. So I think if you can find Byron at 13-1, jump on it like Nick was saying. Listen, Hendrick is notoriously known for testing. As soon as they get into a good position, they're going to test stuff. They're going to hit on stuff and they're going to miss on stuff. But man, it makes them so much better for the playoff run. And I mean, Alex Bowman's a perfect example of how his teammates' testing can make him better for the round. I mean, look at where Hendrick is at right now. They're in a fantastic spot as an organization. They have all 4 cars in the round of 12. I mean, you know the odds. That's fantastic is what odds those are to win a championship. So Hendrick just keeps doing their thing. I know a lot of talk this year about Chevy not making the new body like Ford and Toyota, and here we are again. Chevy just absolutely showing up.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, all 4 Chevys, all 4 HMS cars in the 12-car playoff, and obviously Kyle Larson the favorite. You got to make, at this point in time, Joe Gibbs and Hendrick the co-favorites for the championship. But William Byron 13-1. My turn to pick Ty Gibbs 20-1 is Stevie's turn to pick. So we have 2 turns down. We still, of course, have the other half of the track, 2 turns to go. But to get there, sounds like we need to get there in style, right, Stevie?
That's right. Anywhere worth going is worth going in good boots. Find your perfect pair with TECOVAS. TECOVAS crafts quality Western boots for everyone from generational ranchers and lifelong cowboys to first-time boot buyers. They make it easy for anyone to find their perfect boot. Want a pair of boots that are easy on and easy on the eyes? Me too. That's why every one of TECOVAS boots are handcrafted with over 200 meticulous steps for broken in comfort right out of the box. You can't have a good time in bad boots. That's why you need TECOVAS. Plus, TECOVAS Best and West guarantee you get free returns and exchanges for 30 days. Right now, get 10% off at tecovas.com/runninghot when you sign up for email and text. That's 10% off at tecovas.com/runninghot. tecovas.com/runninghot. See site for details. TECOVAS, point your toes west.
Alrighty, so we are halfway through a lap at Kansas Speedway. That means I'm going to be pushing Stevie into turn 3. All right, third turn, Stevie. We've been talking about them all picks so far, pretty much. So you're just going to take all of Toyota, right?
Yeah, just going to push it in. Listen, I'm wearing the Vegas hat, throwing some dice. We're just going to push it in. Winning manufacturer, Toyota, plus 130. Listen, I think Larson has a really good chance to win this race. I think that Byron has a chance to potentially win this race. But if you look at 5 of the top 8, they're Toyota in speed. And Bubba and Truex are right there too. Like, I don't think Truex is going to give up just because he missed the playoffs or the next round. He wants a win in his final season. So we might even see a little bit more aggressive Martin Truex Jr. because now he's just racing for a win. Finish your career with a win. You've been this nice guy racing clean all these years. So, I mean, if we just look at raw speed, Toyota just is at the top of the chart in so many different cars. We talked about it being a good 2311 track. We haven't really even talked about like how good of a racetrack Kansas has been for Denny Hamlin. He was incredibly fast here earlier this year. Ryan Preece and Austin Hill like messed him up on pit road multiple times. Like Austin Hill, Denny couldn't get around him on pit road a couple times, and then Ryan Preece like slowed up on Denny as Denny was coming out of his pit box one time. And Denny chooses the high line instead of the bottom line and gets put 3 wide. He has a chance to win the race still. He was so good. Tire wear has become a little bit more of a thing at Kansas here recently. He's so good at managing his tires. Ranks first in speed in each of the last 3 Kansas races. So, yeah, I mean, I absolutely love Toyota this week. So betting them at plus 130 to be the race-winning manufacturer.
Yeah, I love this bet as well. I think I'm going to add this to my card as well. Obviously, I have Kyle Larson rated number 1, but then I have Denny Hamlin, I have Tyler Reddick, I have Christopher Bell, and I have Martin Truex Jr. all there as 4 of the next 5 cars. And you can't forget about Bubba Wallace as well and Ty Gibbs as well, who are also right up there. So, I mean, out of the top 8 or 9 cars, I have 6 Toyotas, right? So it's just incredible. How can you not have Toyota to win on your card here? So I think I'm going to add this one here. Toyota plus 130 to win. And for my turn 3 pick, I mentioned it. I was going to go with a Ty Gibbs pick. I'm going to take his top 5 instead of taking his win at plus 325. Just gives me a little more wiggle room there than to finish exactly first. And I love this plus 325 number. If you can get that, if you only have plus 275 available to you, that is fine as well. Totally fine with that number. But Ty Gibbs is so good at these tracks. He's a great driver. Obviously, at Vegas earlier this year, he had a top 5 car. And I was watching that literally last night. I was watching the first Kansas race from 2023. And Ty Gibbs ran top 3 all stage 1. He was so good and ran well in stage 2. There's a weird caution that came out before the end of stage 2. So he didn't get stage points because he ended up pitting and then crashed right at the start of stage 3. So just, really bad luck there. But he was a top 5 car in that first Kansas race last year. Obviously had some issues, wasn't quite as good at the first Kansas race this year as well. But overall, on balance, I mean, Ty Gibbs has had a top 5 car and essentially 3 of the Kansas races, 2 or 3 of the Kansas races he's run in his very young career. So I like Ty Gibbs to have a top 5 finish plus 325. If you only have plus 275, like I said, totally fine. I've got this closer to around plus 225 is fair.
Sorry, distracted by betting this. I'm going to add this one. I like this. I'm right there with you. Listen, I love betting on Ty Gibbs because the speed is there. It's eventually going to happen. He's eventually just going to put together a whole race. And I know we talk about this all the time, but it's going to happen. And Ty Gibbs is going to be someone by the end of his career that's probably 50 plus wins. The kid is super talented. He's in great equipment. He has a ton of backing as far as financial backing. He's not going anywhere. And he's good at so many different racetrack types. He's going to be a NASCAR champion one day. Cold takes exposed, I guess, potentially for me. But I'm a full believer in Ty Gibbs, and when you have an aggressive driver that has talent like Ty Gibbs, you're gonna have races where he's just gonna put it together.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think this is going to be one of those spots, obviously eliminated from the playoffs, but that doesn't change anything. He still wants to get his first career win. Just like you said, Truex wants to get his win in his retirement season. And we've seen non-playoff drivers win. So it's not like all of a sudden they get a bump down or anything like that when they're eliminated from the playoffs or don't make the playoffs. So Ty Gibbs, top 5 finish. My turn 3 pick, Stevie's turn 3 pick, winning manufacturer Toyota, plus 130. So that leaves us with one final turn, and that's turn 4. All right, last turn, Stevie. We got a couple more on the funsy side bets. What do you have for yours?
Always. Turn 4 is funsy. I mean, that's just what it is. I actually kind of like this one. I mean, yeah, it's a funsy bet, but I'm going with Chase Briscoe as the top Ford here at 10-1 for a quarter unit. And there's so many roads of this actually happening that, like, I debated on putting another quarter of a unit on it and making it a half a unit because, like, I was thinking about it. Noah Gragson was really fast here earlier this year. Brad Keselowski and Chris Buescher went into full test mode last year when they got eliminated from the playoff situation, and it incredibly helped them this year. So I wouldn't be shocked if, like, Keselowski and Buescher go into test mode. Stewart-Haas's 4 teams are working on one race car to bring the best race car every week right now. The whole organization is behind Briscoe. Gregson's running practice setups for him. There's been news that, like, Barry's been running some setups to test for Briscoe. So everybody's behind Chase Briscoe. Joey Logano has been awful at Kansas in the next-gen car. He was really, really bad here earlier this year. I know he's had some issues, and you can't just go off of that. But I mean, he's won 1 or 2 races where he's ranked just inside the top 15. He's had 0 races where he's ranked inside the top 10 here as far as speed. I think Blaney and potentially RFK the biggest competition for Briscoe, but I see a lot of roads that, like, Briscoe can get there. And when you have a bet like this that's 10-1. And you see multiple roads, I feel like that's just the types of bets that you take some shots on.
Yeah, I agree with that. 100% agree with that. And, Stewart-Haas Racing has been good at these intermediate tracks. We saw Noah Gragson pull off a strong finish at Las Vegas and also I think at Kansas it was earlier this year. So there definitely is speed in these Stewart-Haas Racing cars. And then when you look, like you mentioned, some of these other Fords, Joey Logano not quite as good at the 1.5 miles right now. Ryan Blaney kind of has been a back half of the top 10 type guy. And then obviously RFK Racing, they're good, but they're a little bit inconsistent. So there's a lot of, in terms of the Ford camp, just a lot of room for, a 10-1, 12-1 type shot to hit, especially. So definitely like the Briscoe call, especially with all the focus at Stewart-Haas Racing on their lone playoff driver. My turn 4 pick. This one's a funsy bet, total funsy bet. I would not recommend this if you're trying to make money. If you want a rooting interest, I do recommend this because I do think this has a fun chance to hit. I really do. And that's Eric Jones for a top 10 finish at 8-1. I would only bet this at 8-1 at BetMGM. And that's the only number I would bet this at. So you can call this a lean if you want. My model does have value on this. I was talking to our friend Jim Sonis. His model does not have value on that. So, I'm always a big proponent of model averaging. So that's why I'm like, okay, probably don't bet this for a money-making bet, but I still like it. I like Eric Jones at the higher speed tracks this year. If we look at Las Vegas, finished 14th. If we look at Texas, finished 19th. That wasn't, maybe the best finish, but ran pretty well. Charlotte, again, finished 19th, but that was a rain-shortened race. Then we go to Pocono. If we want to talk horsepower, he finished 14th. Michigan, he finished 16th. So all of these finishes are in the teens, right? When you're finishing that often in the teens at this track type, there's a good chance you can pop in a top 10 finish with a late caution or two. And we know Kansas has produced some cautions. And guess who finished third at Kansas last year? Eric Jones, right? So we know Toyota makes speed. And he didn't race first Kansas race. He was dealing with his own injury. But when we look at his teammate, John Hunter Nemechek, he finished 13th at the first Kansas race, which is just a few positions outside the top 10 here. So if there's anywhere that Eric Jones is going to get his second top 10 of the year, which is crazy to think about, he only has one top 10 this year. But if he is going to get his second top 10 finish of the year, I think this is probably one of his best spots to do it for the rest of the season.
Yeah, I mean, I'm showing him as like a 19th to 23rd place car. I mean, so not necessarily showing value at 8-1, but really close. So I don't hate this bet. I think that we all kind of expected Legacy to be way better than they have been all year, and now we're going to racetracks for the second time. I expect them to be better. So I expect this team in general to be better. You know, Jimmy's running again. I hate when they have this third car and they're using more resources. But yeah, I mean, going to a racetrack for the second time, I think is a huge thing for a team like Legacy because, you know, obviously they switched from Chevy to Toyota this year and they've been playing catch up all year. And then Eric Jones had the issue, so they played more catch up. So I don't necessarily hate that. I'm an Eric Jones fan. I think Eric Jones is very talented.
I agree. I think he's super talented. I'm glad he signed that extension with Legacy Motor Club. And I don't know. I see speed in this car at, you know, higher speed tracks. I really do. I see speed in this car, and 8-1's right on the borderline of where I'd bet it. So for me, I'm betting it to have a funsy bet on the card, to have something to root for.
Yeah.
Give myself a little extra rooting interest.
Not taking Jimmy race. At 16-1 for a top 10?
No. No,
it's crazy to think about. Like even like 5 years ago, you've been like 16-1 for a top 10 for Jimmy Johnson. You would have bet your whole bankroll on it, and now it's like, not even remotely thinking twice about it.
Yeah. So turn 4, the party turn, the funsy turn. Stevie's going with Chase Briscoe top Ford at 10-1. I'm taking Eric Jones for a top 10 finish at 8-1. So we have completed a lap of Kansas Speedway, took the checkered flag. So let's drive into victory lane. And Stevie, we both had this in the outline. I actually didn't see you had this in the outline. My eyes must have glazed over it. So we both had the exact same pick. What is that?
We're going back to the well. This was our victory lane pick last week. It was Alex Bowman top 10. No chance he goes out and wins the pole again, right? That was fantastic for our top 10 bet. We looked like closing value monsters last week because of that. But yeah, plus 175 for a top 10 for Alex Bowman. This team's just running really well right now. He's obviously, I think he's saved his job for at least one more year at this point. The Justin Haley move, which is so interesting, potentially puts a little bit more pressure on Bowman. He finished 7th here in the spring and qualified 18th in that race. I think that they just have more speed right now than they did in the spring. And I think they're going to bring a really good race car. And I think Alex Bowman is someone that's going to compete. We look at the high-speed intermediates. He's like in that like 10 to 12 range in speed, and we're getting it at plus 175 for a top 10. So, yeah, I mean, I like Bowman. I think this is a really strong spot for him. He's finished top 10 in 4 straight races here with the next-gen car. He missed one because of the injury, but we're getting a guy that's been 100% with the next-gen car at Kansas in the top 10 at plus 175. Seems like a no-brainer bet for me.
Absolutely. Right there with you. I have some interesting stats on Alex Bowman that I was talking about earlier this week with Jordan Maccabee of Rotoballer. Alex Bowman has finished in the top 11 in 10 of the last 11 Kansas races. So to get significant plus money on a top 10 finish is crazy. If we just look in the next gen era, 4 top 10 finishes in 4 races at Kansas. He did miss one of those Kansas races with an injury himself, a back injury from sprint car racing, I think it was. And Alex Bowman, just in his time at Hendrick Motorsports in 13 starts at Kansas, 11 top 11 finishes in 13 races. So he's either finished in the top 10 or within one spot of the top 10. 11 out of 13 times. That's absolutely nuts. You got to take significant plus money on Alex Bowman for a top 10 finish. So that is going to do it for us. Thank you for listening to the Hollywood Casino 400 episode of Running Hot Action Network's Motorsports Betting Podcast. We'll be back this time next week as we talk bets for the Yellowwood 500 at Talladega Superspeedway. On behalf of my co-host, Stephen Young, thanks again for listening. We'll see you back here next week on Running Hot from Action Network.